Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this episode of the Nick Egan Times. On this episode, we have one of the most influential figures in children's entertainment. We have Rich Magallanes. Named one of Hollywood's reporters' 50 most powerful players in kids' entertainment, Rich has spent more than 25 years helping create and develop some of the most beloved animated series in television history, including SpongeBob SquarePants, Dora the Explorer, The Fairy, The Fairly OddParents, Danny Phantom, Invader Sim, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. From humble beginnings growing up on welfare and government assistance, Rich went on to become Senior Vice President of Production and Animation at Nickelodeon, one of the most respected creative executives in the industry, helping shape stories that have inspired millions of children around the world. Welcome to the highly influential Rich, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm
Thank
excited to
you.
have you. Yeah, I'm excited to
Yeah.
have you. All right, let's jump straight into it. Firstly, take us back. Tell us about life growing up and everything relating to that.
Life growing up was chaos. Yeah, I'm the youngest of five boys, and my parents were divorced at a very young age. I just did a speech about this, and it's called "It's on Me," and that speech is came strictly from my heart, and it was all about how I realized at a very young age it was on me to figure it out. It was on me to survive. It was on me to finish. It was on me to succeed. Having this large family around me, but being all alone. And not only were my parents divorced at a very young age, we went on welfare and basically lost the house. And, then we made a transfer from mom back to dad and the whole thing. And we just moved around nonstop. So I went to about five different elementary schools and then another two middle schools. And then by the time we got to high school, I told my dad, I don't care who you marry, I don't care where you go, I'm going to the same high school. And I did. And it was barely, there was a moment where I had to call mom and, stay in the same school district. But yeah, after all that, not really having any guidance, being a total latchkey kid, as we older generation tend to say now, it was it really was on me, to figure out what I was gonna do. When high school, when I graduated, I literally came home to an empty house. Family was gone, there was no furniture, and there was only a sleeping bag on the floor and a lamp plugged into the wall. And it hit me at that moment, like, oh shit, this is really on me. And so I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I decided to go to college. And it wasn't really because I had a plan, it was because I needed a direction. And so I put myself through college. I did it all on my own. It took me forever. And somehow down the journey, I was a bit of a storyteller. And I don't know if it was because of all these, oddball experiences I had or whatever, but I was really good at writing and I really was scared of writing. I really didn't want to do writing, and but I was excelling at it to a point where teachers were saying, "Hey, you should sell this to a magazine," and I was saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I wrote it for your class," and they were like, "No, we're gonna sell it," and I did. I sold a piece to a magazine while I was in college, and thought I was a real rock star. And then the other instructor of mine said, "You should go write for the school paper." And I did that too, mainly because I needed money and it wasn't a lot, but it was another job. I could only have three or four jobs, and I just every piece of article that I wrote for the school paper got on the front page, and I just kept moving and moving and moving. And I always tell people I never knew what I wanted in life, but I knew what I didn't want, and those were my parameters. And so I kept moving ahead, and somehow I was in production along with my friends, and I started working in feature film, as an onset PA, an offset PA, art department coordinator. I became an assistant to a director and then a producer, and it just was a wonderful world. And I felt like this is what I do. I'm part of storytelling. I'm part of production. And then somebody at Nickelodeon said, "Hey, I hear you're in production. I hear you're a writer. I hear you people like you. Will you come over here?" So my plan was never to be some sort of super animation executive. I came into Nick not really knowing much other than watching cartoons as a kid and, enjoying that. But I'm very slapsticky. I'm very cartoony myself. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a walking, talking cartoon character. I had an affinity for animation, even though I still love the live action stuff as well. Um, I started excelling at it. So here I was, a freelance, not even a staff employee. And by the time I left Nick the first time in 2015 or 16, whatever that was, I was senior vice president, of current series. So to go from that trajectory of being like a low level assistant and not even a formal employee to a senior vice president of the company, it was pretty wild. Pretty wild ride. I really grew up there in terms of animation. So it was a great, I worked with so many creators and a great experience. Yeah.
Incredible. Tell me, what was your time like at Nickelodeon? So give me some examples of, I guess, the achievements and what you're most proud of, and then I guess even maybe some challenges that you faced along the way as well.
Yeah, there's always, there's a couple things. I think the wild ride for me was, coming in and being right there on the cusp of SpongeBob coming out of development, and so being there for season one and working on it and seeing the late great Steve Hillenburg and his creative wild imagination and his whole entire crew, some of which are still on the show today, and just really going for that ride with all those people, including Fairly OddParents, and just being on these wonderful shows from day one. Those were like amazing things. And as I grew up there, I and became an executive. Now I was in charge of giving notes, and that kind of situation. And coming from a creative background, I think I made more sense to some of the creators than some of the other execs, but not to put anybody down. There's always this double-edged sword about being an executive, when you're at a company, because you're naturally hated right off the bat. The creatives just hate you until they really find out who you are and what you come from. And then they still might hate you. But yeah, if you are giving notes that make sense, that actually further the story, and make them think about what they wrote, and why this is better to go this way, or if you can convince me what your story is better, then and that's with editing, that's with character design, that's with everything from voiceover to music, everything. I love all of that. And so that was all part of my journey, which was really fun and adventurous and exciting. And I think that's why I excelled. They say if you're doing something good, you're going to move up. And I just did really good work. I just really tried hard and I was passionate about it and, determined, but I wasn't thinking in my mind, like, I got to be a vice president or a this. When I became a manager, I thought I was top notch, like I thought I hit the ceiling, but yeah, you just keep working and keep doing your things. And the other thing that I learned about moving up the chain, the higher you go, some people are going to try to take you down. It becomes competitive after a while with other executives, and there's just people who just don't like you, like they're going to try to stab you in the back. I don't think I had a lot of that, though, thank God, but I will say I saw it, especially with my bosses. People would just, say nasty things about them. And I'd say, she's not an idiot. She's actually running the company. I'd like to see you in those shoes. You got to make some really serious decisions, and people aren't going to be happy with it all the time. But that is the case. Whenever you become a leader, whenever you're in charge, whenever you're at that level, there's going to be somebody who's threatened by you, somebody who's jealous of you, and somebody who just wants to take you down. And that's usually from somebody down below. I don't think I've ever seen it from somebody up above. So, but those are kind of like, in a nutshell, the fun journey of it, and then also the learning curves.
Sure, thank you. That's great insight. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Tell me actually about SpongeBob SquarePants, Dora the Explorer, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Tell me about that experience or those experiences.
Yeah, SpongeBob is one of my favorites. I mean, I always say the creator of that show, I learned so much, just from being around him, just absorbing, if you will, not to do a pun on this, but I was really, absorbing his integrity. That's what I always said about Steve, is like he had integrity for the character. He had so many things that he wouldn't allow us to do, even though technically we were the network and we were allowed to, do basically what we wanted. He would say, absolutely not, you're not doing that. We'd say, well, you're going to make a lot of money if we do this, and we're going to sell it here. And no, it's not what the character does. I remember one time, for a little while, I sat in a room with him and we went through all the consumer products, materials and the concepts and stuff. And he just would reject things right off the bat, and say, no, this is ridiculous and that's silly. And this is, and the nose is wrong. And too many pores on the face and the stripes on the socks and the belt loops. And I was like, oh no, oh my God. It's like this. I learned so much about the integrity of a character, because of that. And Dora, every show that you work on, there's so many shows I worked on that there's something you're like, I don't really want to do this. I really don't want to do this. But then you work on it and you fall in love with it. I think I'll talk about Turtles first because Turtle was something that came into my plate where, to be honest with you, I don't normally say this out loud, but I really didn't want it, and I didn't want it because it was a monster, because it was huge, and there's so many fans out there. There's super fans, and our job was to take it and to hit the reset button and keep the integrity of the property and the characters, but then do something new and different. And it was almost 25 years, and it was just like, no, I don't want this responsibility. But I took it on, mainly because they told me to, and I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I took it on, and it ended up being my most beloved project. I got to meet Kevin Eastman and travel around the world with him. We literally went to France and Germany, and we went all over the place selling and doing podcasts and going to all the different Comic Cons worldwide. And he became such a dear friend of mine, and he still is. And it was an amazing experience. But I think what we did with the show, on top of that, Ciro Nieli was the executive producer, and he's really a turtle head, and he really masterminded the creative direction, and working together with him and just really trying to figure out, like, how do we do this in a new, fresh way that is going to be exciting, not alienate people. I certainly didn't want to piss anybody off or get anybody too angry, or end up getting violently abused by somebody. So I mean, these are real fans. And then coming back, I left Dora for a while and worked at Haim Saban, Saban Brands, worked with Haim. And then I created my own show, and which Nick bought, strangely, Rainbow Butterfly Unicorn Kitty. And then I was on my own again after that, bouncing around, helping people develop things. And then Nick had asked me to come back and help reboot Dora. And having my experience from Turtles, and doing that massive reboot on a massive franchise. Here's Dora, another massive franchise worldwide, 2 decades going strong. It's had a couple years break at this point. And I just looked at the materials and was like, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And then they just said, hey, why don't you just come on in? And so I became the executive producer and the showrunner for the show. And again, it was one of those things with another show where Dora, you think, is so simple and so easy, and yet it was one of the toughest shows I ever worked on, because there's so many rules, and she's such a she's a very simple character, but complex world, very, very complex. We're teaching preschool now, and it's language, and it's everything, the music, and it's the rhythm, and it's the pacing, and it was just so much. It was absolutely incredible, to have that experience.
It's impressive everything you've done too. Wow, it's sensational.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is something working in kids entertainment that the general public wouldn't know about?
I don't think they know how much blood, sweat, tears, and money goes into making animation. Animation is very expensive. That's why AI is blowing everything up right now. Because for basically the entire time of being in animation, everybody always said, we want it faster, we want it cheaper. Why does it take so long? Why does it cost so much? Because you have your writers, the writers, it all starts with writing. First, you have your creators who create the thing, and then you have the writers who have to write the scripts, and then the scripts have to be drawn out, and everything was drawn at beginning, hand drawn, and then it was more computer based, but it's still storyboard, and then storyboards go into animatics, and animatics have to be edited, and then you got to add in the dialogue, and then every little bit, every layer adds to the money and the time, and people don't realize how long it can take to make 11 minutes of animation, and it's just absolutely an insane amount of time and money, but it's also pure creative. It's if I went into a room of art students and I said, hey, everybody draw me a tree, I'm going to get 50 different trees. Some are going to have branches, some are going to be full bushes, some are going to be skinny oak, pine, whatever. I mean, it's endless. So unless you write in there every little thing, which you can't always do, that's why it's creative, and you have to realize and go through and give all those notes, and it takes so much time to get all that done. But yeah, the general public doesn't realize how much, um, and it's also the passion for animation. Everybody who's in animation, from the storyboard artists, from the writers, from the voiceover artists, to the music people, to the editors, to every single person loves that medium, and they're celebrating it, and they're devoted to it. So there's this, and listen, I worked on live action, and live action is, you have a general love for that too. I will say though, sometimes on live action sets, you got your people who are just there to get it done. They're working hard. Everybody's working hard. Production in live action is extremely tough and grueling, and it's fast. But the passion and the artistry that comes from animation kind of excels.
Sure. How do you think AI is going to affect animation? And not just now, but I'm talking, I guess, the future as well. But how will it affect the whole space?
Yeah, it's already affected it. I mean, companies are taking it on, and writers are. Everybody's scared. It's not just writers, it's artists, it's music, it's voiceover actors, everybody. It's blowing it up. And I think I, here's what I'll say, because it's really controversial. I could
Yeah.
say I'm not scared of AI, and people could be like, I hate you, and then I could say, hey, you need to embrace it, and people are like, that's right. So it's a really like tough argument right now, but I do think people are coming around to realizing it's a tool. You have to, it's not going to go away. As I like to say, that toothpaste is out of the tube. Good luck trying to shove that back in there, and it's getting better every single day. There's nothing about it that's going to go away. It's just going to keep improving. It's improved right now since our conversation as we're talking,
Yeah.
and it's annoying. It's annoying because it tries to rewrite everything. It tries to rewrite your emails, like, and it's just right now as we got on Zoom, it's trying to record my stuff, and I was like, "Stop it, go away," like because I
Yeah.
don't like it all the time. But I do like the efficiency of it, and I do like using it as a tool. But I don't want it to write. It's not my voice, and sure, it can mimic my voice, and it can mimic somebody's artwork, and it can do things like that. But you right now, it's not there, and you can tell. Will it get there? Yeah, it will, and will it make a difference? I'm not 100% sure yet. I don't know if it will fully replace the human touch. The human touch needs to be on top of it.
Sure. What would you, looking back at your career, what would you like your legacy to be?
Wow. You know what? One thing that I actually care about people, and I care about bringing people together, and I care about uh, helping people, to move on to the next level, the next step, and um, nurturing people. And I think I would love people to know, like, like, oh, he did such great. People have said to me, that's my superpower. Your superpower is bringing people together. I'm creating my own business called Animated You, and I put on a 2-day symposium. And this is a space that is created for creators of all levels. So it doesn't matter if you're experienced or not. You can be in this conversation and you can get something out of it, or you can be completely new and you get a whole lot out of it, like, but my thing was to bring people together and to be real, not just do a panel of like, oh, this is what I'm working on and this is how we did it. And boy, was it tough and aren't we successful, but it's also, um, hey, I was out of work for 2 years and I just kept grinding and grinding and grinding. And then this opportunity came up, and guess what? I had the goods to go. But if I didn't grind, I wouldn't be here today on stage talking to you right now. And I talked about that experience myself. And I had over 20 speakers. They're all experienced, they're all wonderful, top notch people. And we shared and we bonded. And it was an amazing, amazing event, because of that whole coming together. And I felt like I go to a lot of events, I go to a lot of animation festivals, and one thing with AI blowing everything up and everybody being nervous and scared and worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, I think the one thing I kept walking away with was like, you know what? Creators still want to create. creators still have an idea, a vision, and they want to execute it out. And so let's get together and talk about that. Let's be positive. Let's do something like that. So I think I'm hoping, that that's what people would recognize.
Oh, exceptional. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice? Oh gosh, that's a tough one for me. I'm so I don't know, I have a hard time accepting myself, and I think that's one of the best pieces of advice is like, hey, recognize what you do, own up to what you do and what you've done. I'm always really shy to kind of say, hey, I did this and I did that, and I don't really care like about awards, for example. You know, awards are funny to me because I don't think people work on projects to be like, well, I'm gonna kill the other team. There's no other team. We're just making a great project. But if you get an accolade, it's great. You celebrate whatever. But then it just becomes a marketing tool. So I think the best piece of advice for me is to stay focused. My ADD is bouncing all over the place all the time, but stay focused and continue to be myself and accept
Oh,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. What do you love most about animation? If there was one part of animation that you love the most, what is it?
I really love, this might sound a little weird. I'm a music guy. Like I love music. And I don't know if I can actually just pick one thing, to be honest with you. I
Sure,
do a
yeah.
little voiceover work also, so I love how the voices bring the characters to life, even from movies, with real actors, or I don't want to say real actors, celebrity actors, I should
Yeah,
say,
yeah, okay.
that lend their voices to the animated movies and they bring those characters to life. There's that, and then there's the people who aren't really known out there in the world as celebrities, but you know them because they do all your character voices, and they're amazing. And so I really love that, and I love music because again, I think music is the emotion that drives everything through. But I'm going to go all over the place now. I love sound effects too. I'm a
Yeah.
huge, huge cartoony, banana peel, fart, horn, chicken, whatever you
Yeah, I
got.
get it. Yeah.
And I'm talking like old school horn now, ooga, and I'll sit in the editing bay and those guys love me because I say I want it to go pew 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 pew, and I have to. You can't say that. You can't spell that out. You can't write that in a note. So I had to be in the room and do the, I had to do the sound effects, and they're like, "Oh, I got you," and it's awesome. I love that process.
Yeah, fascinating. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken in your career?
Biggest risk. Gosh, there's been a couple. You know, there's. I'm going to tell you a quick story of when I was a writer, and I just got out of college, and I was writing. I was in the mail room, and I'll give you the quick version of it. I was in the mail room, and I thought this sucks. I have a degree in journalism, and I'm in the mail room at a radio station that has an AM station where they're doing news. They're writing news, and I'm like, that's me. So um, I was making the coffee. I was coffee boy. I was mailroom guy. I was all that guy, and I thought this is horrible. I just graduated college and I'm making, minimum wage and making people's coffee and cleaning up. And so I took my degree. I had to deliver the mail to everybody, including the general manager. So I put my degree in the bottom of his mail, put a big rubber band around it. I mean, I put my real, like the hard bound book cover, the real degree, and I put it in there, and I put it in his office, and I left it there, and I came back about 2 hours later, walking by, and I saw him, and he was sitting there at his desk, and he had it open, and he was looking at it, and I literally was like, "Oh shit!" So I just kept walking really fast, and I heard him go, "Hey!" And I thought, "Oh no, I'm fired," but then I thought, "Who cares? I'm in the mail room, So and no knock on mail rooms, by the way, but I wanted more, and so he brought me in. And he said, "Sit down," and I was shaking, and he handed me back my degree, my diploma, and he just said, "Smart, real smart." And he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I have a degree in journalism. I want to work in the newsroom." And he said, "I'll see what I can do." 2 weeks later, I was the youngest kid in that mailroom, not the mailroom, newsroom, writing, and that's I think I always think about that because it's taking a chance. It's putting yourself out there. Whether you're asking for a promotion, whether you're trying to get to the next level, whether you're trying to take on something new. It's always, to me, always comes back to that.
That's an incredible story, and yeah, wow, that's incredible. Um, what keeps you optimistic about the future?
I'm generally a positive guy, and I really do. I listen to motivational tapes and speakers and podcasts, and I run, and that's my meditation. I do meditate as well, but I'm very active, and one way I keep myself, in that optimistic place is I don't care if it's for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or if it's for an hour and a half. I listen to somebody saying something good, something empowering, and it jazzes me up. And that's my running is the same thing. I run almost every day, and I have to keep it going. And when I don't, my mood really deflates. But yeah, it's for me, it's just knowing that we all have really great gifts, and if you don't share it, if you don't put it out there, the world's missing out on what you have to offer. And it doesn't matter, like everyone's different, and that's your superpower. You are different, and so you need to share that because it's different point of views, it's different stories, it's everything that we've heard about this through coming through motivational sayings and so forth. But I believe it 100%.
Yeah, great. If you were 18 again and you could change anything personally or professionally in your life, what would you change?
Hmm. I think I would have. It's again, that's a tricky question. I feel like I would mellow out some of the chaos. I don't know if I'd change it 100%, but I would mellow it out. I mean, there was times where I literally didn't know what I was doing in my life, and I didn't know how it was going to pan out. I just talked to a young artist today, she's 24, and I'm like, you got time, but don't waste it. You're not going to figure out your answer. You're going to go down this path, and it's going to maybe, I think that to me is something. I had so many different ways of going different routes, and it got a little confusing. Maybe I had some bad advice from certain people. If I could had been smarter, in terms of being a little more worldly or wise. I didn't get out of California until I started going to New York for Nickelodeon, and that was almost in my 30s, no, late 20s. But it was like it's kind of crazy to think about that and be like, oh, I didn't have this knowledge, this world knowledge, and I think I would like to get more of that earlier.
Yeah, wonderful. Rich, thank you so much for coming on the show. I do appreciate it. It's incredible everything you've done in your career, even obviously what you're doing now. And yeah, I wish you nothing but the best.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I hope this was a great experience as well. So
Yeah, it was. It was.
yeah, great.
Have a good day.